That woman doesn't belong here. The words cut through the grand hall of the Hawthorne estate like the crack of a whip, sharp enough to make Patrick Hawthorne glance up from his seat at the head of the long mahogany table. Across the marble floor, Maya Collins knelt quietly, sweeping the shards of a crystal glass into a dustpan. Her gray cleaning uniform looked out of place against the gleam of gold chandeliers and silk drapes, but there was nothing out of place about the calm precision in her movements. 5 women, all immaculately dressed in designer dresses and dripping with diamonds, sat watching her with thin, practiced smiles. They weren't here for dinner. They were here to win. The contest had been Patrick's unusual way of helping his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, choose a new mother after losing her own a year ago. Each woman was beautiful, educated, and from a family with a last name that could open any door in high society. On paper, they were perfect. In reality, they were venom wrapped in silk. From the moment they stepped into the mansion, they noticed Lily's preference for Maya, her laughter brighter when Maya braided her hair, her appetite stronger when Maya cooked breakfast. And for women who believed in hierarchy above all else, that was intolerable. Victoria Langford, the oil heiress leading their silent war, leaned toward the others and whispered, "The sooner that maid learns her place, the better." They didn't know Patrick was watching through the discreet security cameras he'd had installed after Lily's sudden nightmares returned, nor did they know that Maya's bowed head was not submission, it was strategy. She'd seen prejudice before, and she knew how to wait. If you were standing there hearing someone degraded for nothing but who they are, would you speak up or stay silent? Maya Collins had never planned to be a housekeeper in a billionaire's mansion. Just 5 years earlier, she had been standing in front of a chalkboard in a bustling Atlanta classroom, teaching third graders about multiplication tables and the solar system. She loved the rhythm of a school day, the smell of pencil shavings, the sound of kids whispering when they thought she wasn't listening, the joy of watching someone's eyes light up when a lesson finally clicked. But life had a way of tearing up the neat lesson plans you thought you had. When her mother's health began to fail and medical bills started piling up like bricks on her chest, Maya had no choice but to take the first job that paid enough to keep them both afloat. Cleaning other people's homes was never part of her dream, but at least it kept the lights on and the prescriptions filled. Patrick Hawthorne's mansion was her third job in 2 years, and she'd taken it for the steady hours and quiet environment. She hadn't expected Lily Hawthorne. The little girl had been polite at first, reserved in the way children sometimes are when they've been taught to keep their feelings locked away. But one morning, while Maya was polishing the banister, Lily came downstairs in tears because none of the contestants wanted to play with her. Maya had crouched down, tied the girl's shoelaces, and asked if she wanted to help bake muffins instead. It became their ritual, mornings in the kitchen, flour on their hands, laughter bouncing off the marble counters. The bond between them grew so naturally that Maya hardly noticed at first how the 5 women began to bristle. They would sweep into the kitchen uninvited, their heels clicking sharply on the tile, making comments about influences from the wrong side of town and what's appropriate for a child of her standing. Patrick might have missed it, if not for the subtle changes in Lily. Shadows under her eyes, restless nights, the return of the nightmares she had finally begun to outgrow. Concerned, he had the mansion wired with discreet microphones and hidden cameras, the kind that blended seamlessly into crown molding and light fixtures. What he saw made his stomach twist. Whispered insults, pointed looks, and an unspoken alliance among the women to keep Maya on the periphery. Maya knew she was being watched, not by the cameras, but by eyes that saw her as less than human. Still, she never fought back directly. She understood something they didn't. Dignity was not given by others. It was kept for yourself. When Lily clung to her in front of them, Maya would smile softly and redirect the child, refusing to feed the competition. That restraint was a lesson she had learned long before she set foot in the Hawthorne estate. Growing up in a neighborhood where respect had to be earned twice over if you were black and female, she had learned that reacting to every provocation was exhausting and often pointless. Better to bide your time, better to let the truth reveal itself. And in Patrick's mansion, the truth was already writing itself in every frame of video, every second of audio he quietly archived. Maya had no idea that the man signing her paycheck was slowly becoming her quiet ally, not just for her sake, but for the little girl who had chosen flower and laughter over pearls and pedigree. It was a gray Saturday afternoon when Charlotte Sterling rolled her wheelchair into the little corner cafe on Peachtree Street. The place smelled like warm cinnamon and fresh espresso, a welcome contrast to the cold drizzle outside. She had come alone at first, planning to treat herself to a slice of cake for her 29th birthday, a modest celebration compared to the glittering galas she had once attended before the accident. But she wasn't alone for long. Maya had spotted her from across the cafe while picking up pastries with her daughter, Sophie. "Mind if we join you?" Maya had asked with a warm smile, balancing a paper bag in one hand and Sophie's small fingers in the other. Charlotte hesitated for only a second before nodding. They settled into the table by the window, chatting easily, the conversation flowing in a way Charlotte hadn't experienced in years. They laughed about Sophie's latest obsession with building elaborate Lego castles and shared stories about Atlanta's unpredictable weather. By the time the waiter brought out a small chocolate cake with a single candle, the three of them felt like old friends. Maya and Sophie sang happy birthday quietly, but with genuine warmth, their voices mingling with the soft hum of the cafe. That was the moment Graham Sterling walked in. The tall, silver-haired CEO looked as though he had stepped out of a Wall Street profile. Tailored charcoal suit, leather briefcase, expression carved from stone. His eyes narrowed the instant he saw Charlotte sitting with Maya and Sophie. Without a word, he crossed the room in long, purposeful strides, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was loud enough to silence half the cafe. Charlotte's posture stiffened, but her voice remained calm. "Celebrating my birthday? Something you haven't done with me in 2 years." The words landed like a slap. Graham's gaze shifted to Maya and Sophie, his jaw tightening with the kind of contempt that only comes from a man convinced of his own superiority. "Not with me. Not with these people." The phrase dripped with disdain, and a few customers exchanged uneasy glances. Maya's arm instinctively moved to shield Sophie, but Charlotte's voice cut through the tension. "You haven't bothered anyone. In fact, you're the only people who remembered it's my birthday." For a moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. Then, one by one, phones appeared in the hands of nearby patrons, cameras recording. Graham noticed, his expression darkening, but it was too late. By the time he left, social media had already claimed the moment. The hashtags Sterling Snob and Birthday with Dignity began to trend within the hour, each post more critical than the last. Videos of the confrontation were shared thousands of times, dissected in comment threads that pulled no punches. Some accused Graham of blatant racism, others of hypocrisy for preaching corporate diversity, while humiliating his own daughter for sitting with a black family. In the quiet after the storm, Charlotte sat back in her chair, looking at Maya and Sophie. "Well," she said with a dry chuckle, "I guess I'm officially the family disgrace now." Maya met her gaze, her expression steady. "Or maybe you're just the one willing to do the right thing." Outside, the drizzle turned to steady rain, but inside the cafe, a strange warmth lingered, an unspoken understanding that something significant had just shifted. By the time Charlotte returned to the Sterling Global penthouse that evening, the city skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was awash in streaks of neon light reflecting off the wet streets below. She wheeled herself through the front door, already expecting the storm that was coming. Graham Sterling was waiting in his office, the dim glow of a desk lamp illuminating the shelves of framed awards, glossy magazine covers, and crystal trophies that celebrated his so-called philanthropy and leadership. He didn't waste a second. "Do you have any idea how much damage you've done to our image?" he barked, pacing behind his desk like a caged predator. "The company's stock is down 2% in a single day. Do you realize what that means?" Charlotte set her bag down on the leather chair opposite him, her hands resting on her wheelchair's rims. "It means people saw who you really are," she said evenly. His head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. "Don't you dare lecture me. I've spent decades building Sterling Global into what it is today. One viral video doesn't define me." "No," Charlotte replied, her tone icy but controlled. "But it confirms what I've known for years. You're a hypocrite. You write million-dollar checks to charities for underprivileged communities, pose for pictures with black children in hospitals, but you can't stand your own daughter being kind to a black family in public. Graham's face flushed with a mixture of anger and something deeper, guilt, though he would never admit it. This isn't about race, he snapped. It's about propriety. That man was clearly taking advantage of you. Charlotte let out a bitter laugh, the kind that comes from years of unspoken wounds. Taking advantage? He and his daughter sang happy birthday to me. That's more than you've done since before my accident. The word hung in the air like a verdict, and Graham's expression faltered for just a moment. 2 years of avoiding the subject, pretending the wheelchair wasn't there, pretending she wasn't a reminder of something imperfect in his carefully curated life. This is different, he insisted, his voice quieter, but no less defensive. Different because now I'm an embarrassment to you, Charlotte said, her voice rising, the dam of restraint beginning to crack. A disabled daughter doesn't fit your image as a powerful CEO, does she? Graham looked away, his jaw tightening. I'm hiring new security. You're not going out alone anymore. This social media hysteria will blow over if you stay quiet. Charlotte's voice turned sharp. You can't lock me up here forever. Yes, he said coldly. I can, and I will if that's what it takes to protect the company. The conversation ended there, the air thick with hostility. Charlotte wheeled herself back to her room, her mind spinning. She had lived in this glass and marble prison long enough to know its shadows, its blind spots, and most importantly, its weaknesses. For 2 years, she had been the silent observer, the broken doll tucked into a corner while people talked freely in front of her, assuming she was invisible. They never realized she was listening, learning, remembering. That night, as Graham worked late in his office, Charlotte powered up a slim black laptop he didn't know she owned. She connected to the building's secure network, bypassing its basic encryption with the ease of someone who had been preparing for this moment for years. His passwords were predictable, variations of the company name in the current year. Within minutes, she was deep in the Sterling Global archives, pulling up emails, contract drafts, and meeting transcripts she had quietly collected over time. The work felt mechanical, but her heart was pounding. This was no longer about a birthday or a public scene in a cafe. This was about years of hypocrisy, exploitation, and control. And Charlotte Sterling had finally decided she was done playing the role he had written for her. Charlotte had long ago accepted that Graham Sterling would never see her as anything but a fragile inconvenience, a PR liability to be hidden away when the cameras came out. What he didn't know was that the daughter he dismissed had been quietly building something far more dangerous than a rebellious streak. 2 years earlier, not long after the accident that confined her to a wheelchair, Charlotte had attended a lecture on disability rights, more to escape the suffocating silence of the penthouse than anything else. That's where she met Alex Moreno, a sharp-eyed investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing corruption that most newsrooms were too afraid to touch. At the time, she had only passed along a few casual comments about Sterling Global's questionable practices. But over time, those comments turned into documents, then into recordings, until they formed a pattern that even she couldn't ignore. She had heard things in the shadows of boardroom doorways, executives openly strategizing how to pressure low-income families to sell their properties for pennies, discussing how to disguise predatory contracts under the banner of urban revitalization. Each time she overheard something damning, she stored it away, both in her memory and on a secure, encrypted drive hidden inside the lining of her wheelchair cushion. After the cafe incident, she knew the time had come to move from collection to execution. Graham thought isolating her would protect him, but all it did was remove distractions. She had uninterrupted hours now, days even, to comb through her archive. Old emails from Graham to city officials, dripping with arrogance and entitlement. Audio files of closed-door meetings where his voice rang clear, giving orders that would devastate entire communities. Spreadsheets detailing shell companies used to funnel illicit profits into offshore accounts. She packaged them carefully, categorizing each piece for maximum impact, and sent a message to Alex. It's time. The reply came almost instantly. Finally, do you have everything? Everything and more, she typed back. Meanwhile, across the city, Maya and Sophie were finishing their nightly routine. David Carter, Maya's longtime friend and a digital security expert, had just closed his laptop after running a full authenticity check on the files Charlotte had sent through Alex. "Every byte checks out," he told Maya. "If this goes public, Sterling Global won't just take a hit, they'll be gutted." Back in the penthouse, Charlotte kept her actions hidden under the humdrum rhythms Graham was used to. She read in the library. She watched documentaries in the media room. She dined at the same marble table under the same crystal chandelier. But every spare moment was spent fine-tuning her digital strike. She even timed her data uploads to coincide with Graham's video conferences, knowing the heavy bandwidth use would mask her activities. One night, as she reviewed a particularly damning set of recordings, she caught herself staring at her own reflection in the darkened window. She didn't look like the girl she used to be, the one who measured her worth by her father's approval. This woman was sharper, harder, forged by betrayal and the slow burn of injustice. When she finally clicked send on the master file to Alex, there was no tremor in her hands. She sat back, breathing deeply, knowing there was no going back now. On the other side of the city, Alex began preparing the story for publication, cross-referencing every detail, coordinating with legal teams to withstand the inevitable lawsuits. David Carter worked in parallel, securing multiple backups across servers that couldn't be traced. "When this drops," David said to Maya, "it's going to be nuclear." Maya nodded, her gaze drifting to Sophie asleep on the couch. "Good. Some people need to feel the blast before they learn." And in the quiet heart of the Sterling penthouse, Charlotte waited. She didn't feel fear, only a fierce, focused anticipation. Graham Sterling had built his empire on underestimating people he thought couldn't touch him. But he had spent 2 years under the same roof as the one person who could bring it all crashing down. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday when Graham Sterling sat down at the mahogany breakfast table, a steaming cup of Colombian coffee in his hand, and opened his tablet to scan the financial news. The first headline froze him in place. "Empire of Hypocrisy: How Graham Sterling Built His Fortune by Destroying Black Communities." His pulse spiked. He tapped the link, and the page exploded with high-resolution photographs, leaked internal documents, and audio transcripts. The first recording began to play automatically, his own voice, unmistakable, saying, "We offer them crumbs, they take them, we make millions. That's capitalism working perfectly." He felt the blood drain from his face. That meeting had been behind closed doors 3 years ago. How had they gotten it? Scrolling further, he found hundreds of emails bearing his digital signature, outlining strategies to manipulate government contracts, bribe city inspectors, and pressure vulnerable families to sell their homes for pennies. There were spreadsheets tracing millions in illicit profits funneled through offshore accounts. It was all there, every dirty deal, every corrupt maneuver, organized with surgical precision. His hands shook as he called Marcus Webb, his communications director. "Have you seen this?" Graham demanded. "It's devastating," Marcus said, his voice tight. "And the recordings, they're flawless. The evidence is overwhelming. We have maybe hours before the stock free falls." "Where did it come from?" Graham barked. There was a pause, then Marcus read aloud a small footnote from the article. "Special thanks to the anonymous source who collected evidence over 2 years. 2 years. Graham's stomach dropped. That was exactly how long Charlotte had been in her wheelchair, living under his roof. His mind spun. He pushed back from the table, storming toward his office, when the sound of wheels on marble made him stop cold. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, wearing an expression that was equal parts calm and unyielding. "Good morning, Dad," she said. "Did you see the news?" "You?" His voice was a growl, part shock, part disbelief. "For 2 years, she said evenly, you treated me like a broken ornament. You talked about me like I wasn't in the room, held meetings where you assumed I couldn't hear. You forgot that, before the accident, I had a degree in business, and I paid attention. You don't understand the consequences of this," he snapped. "I understand perfectly," she cut in. "So perfectly that I've already sent copies of everything to the federal prosecutor's office, the IRS, and the FBI. Graham staggered back, gripping the edge of his desk. "You ruined everything. The company, our family, our name." "No," Charlotte said, her eyes locking on his. "I fixed it. You built your empire on destroying lives like David Carter's and Maya Collins. Entire neighborhoods gutted because you wanted a bigger profit margin. That ends today." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled faintly. "David just texted me. 3 companies offered him jobs this morning. Your narrative isn't the only one that's changing." By noon, the damage was irreversible. Sterling Global stock had plummeted 87%. Government contracts were suspended indefinitely. News outlets across the country replayed the recordings on a loop, dissecting every damning detail. Protesters gathered outside the company's headquarters, holding signs that read, "Justice for our communities," and Sterling's greed, our loss. At 3 p.m., federal agents arrived at the penthouse with a warrant. Graham was arrested on charges of racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud. Cameras flashed as he was led out in handcuffs. The image of a man who had once been untouchable, now reduced to a cautionary tale. That evening, in the quiet of her room, Charlotte took a call from Alex Moreno. "It's done," he said. "They're calling this the biggest corporate scandal in a decade." "Good," Charlotte replied. "Now maybe people will start listening to the ones they've ignored for too long." She ended the call and looked out over the city. Somewhere she imagined Graham sitting in a holding cell, replaying every moment he had underestimated her. And she knew he finally understood the fatal mistake he'd made, thinking that power came from silencing others, when in truth, the most dangerous voices are the ones you never hear coming. 6 months later, Charlotte Sterling wheeled herself onto the stage of a packed conference hall in Chicago, the applause washing over her like a warm tide. Sterling Global was no longer the shadowy empire it had been. Under her leadership, it had transformed into a model of corporate responsibility, investing millions in affordable housing, small business grants, and education programs for underserved communities. David Carter now headed the company's new Department of Social Impact, and Maya Collins managed a network of community learning centers, with Sophie often at her side handing out books to children. Graham Sterling, now inmate number 48217 at a federal prison, had been sentenced to 15 years, his former life reduced to a number on a docket. He watched Charlotte's keynote speech from a small television in the prison common room, his face unreadable as she spoke. "2 years ago, I was told I was a liability," Charlotte told the audience, her voice steady. "I was treated as if my wheelchair defined my worth. Today I lead a company worth billions, not because I learned to play by the rules I was given, but because I refused to let those rules limit what I could do for others." The crowd erupted in applause, but Charlotte's gaze softened when it fell on the front row, where Maya and Sophie sat smiling. After the event, in a quieter moment, she stood by the window overlooking the city skyline. Maya joined her, coffee cup in hand. "Do you think he'll ever understand?" Maya asked. Charlotte thought for a long moment. "Maybe, or maybe it's enough that everyone else does." Weeks later, Charlotte received a letter from Graham. It was short, just one line in his careful, slanted handwriting. "I am proud of the woman you became, even if it was despite me." She folded it carefully, tucked it into a drawer, and went back to work. Because there was still more to build, more to change, more to prove, not to him, but to the world. True power, she knew now, wasn't in tearing others down. It was in lifting them up so high that the people who tried to hold them back could never reach them again. If you had the chance to stand up against someone who spent their life underestimating you, would you take it or would you walk away? Share your thoughts below.